Hello ladies and gentlemen, Centurion here. Welcome to ESO Vault. I've been on the test server this week checking out the new Gold Road content. My focus has been the scribing system as it relates to builds and trying to determine how useful it's going to be. I uploaded a Nightblade build that took advantage of one of the new scribe skills. I said in that video that I was interested in seeing if anything could be useful to a Nightblade, and that was because Nightblades have a great skills kit. I figured if any of the new scribe skills could find a home on a Nightblade, that they could definitely be useful to other classes. So anyway, I did in fact find a skill that was useful on my Nightblade, and that started me looking at classes that didn't really have as much going on for them as the Nightblade. That idea brought me to the Necromancer, and I'm not trying to dog on Necromancers here. I really like the class, but I have to be honest. I find it extremely difficult to get Necromancer builds to work. And by getting them to work, I mean work as well or easily as my builds for other classes. And I'm talking about PvE damage dealer setups here. That's what I do, and I think that's what most people are interested in. And you guys that have been following the channel know that I don't do meta stuff. I'm interested in what I call middle game builds. And these are builds that I think work better for the average player. I more or less follow what I refer to as the 3 R's. That's readily available gear, reproducible rotations, and reachable DPS. Alright, now that I got that out of the way, let's get back to the Necromancer because that's the subject of today's build video. And I'm happy to say that my harebrained theory has in fact worked out, because scribing helped me enormously on this Necro build. While I used only one scribe skill on the Nightblade, on today's Necro I'm using 3. Scribing has boosted my Necro not just to an acceptable level, but it's brought it even with my best builds. And with that, let's take a look at the character sheet for today's Necro build, the Bloody Knife. This time I made a High Elf character. I think this is only the second High Elf I've ever rolled. Not that there's anything wrong with High Elf, I just don't usually play in that alliance. High Elves turn out to be pretty good for a damage dealer. They have bonuses to weapon and spell damage and both recoveries. They have a 2,000 point bonus to Magicka, so they'll do best in Magicka based builds, but that's not going to stop me from using this one for a stamina build. And you shouldn't let racial bonuses or lack thereof stop you from playing a particular race. Play the race you find interesting because in the grand scheme of things, the differences between the races are small. If you absolutely want to know the best stam races, I'll put the tier list up on the screen. I got this list from Hack the Minotaur, and he puts out a lot of good information. His version of this is pretty long though, so I'm presenting it in a condensed format. I'm using Lavafoot Soup and Salt Rice here to buff stamina and stamina recovery. If I need more health for something I'm doing, I might switch to Artaeum Takeaway Broth. If I want to permanently give the character more health though, I'll just put a health glyph or 2 on my armor. I like that method because I can keep the high recovery bonus from the Lavafoot Soup that way. I'm using the Thief Mundus for more critical chance, and that's always my choice. You may have read or seen something where someone said to use the Lover Mundus. I wouldn't if I were you. In my builds, I include a source of major breach 99% of the time, and that's all the penetration you need. There are numerous reasons why taking the crit from the Thief is better. Sets that work on crit, maximizing critical damage, and avoiding over penetration are a few. Stick with the Thief. Alright, now that I've finished my little tirade, let's look at the top of the character sheet. I sometimes wonder why I go over the character sheet, but when I think about it, I realize that it can be helpful to see what a normal unbuffed character sheet for a high-level character looks like. I have 19,000 points of health, and if this were one of my actual characters, I would raise that by putting a health glyph on one of my big armor pieces, and that's either the head, chest, or the legs. I have 28,000 points of stamina, and that's my main resource I'm drawing on here. Stamina recovery is at 1,400, and that's right at the range I need for PvE content. Weapon damage is at 5,000 and crit is at 42%. All these numbers have one thing in common, and that's that there's nothing extraordinary about them. These numbers are all going to get buffed in combat, and these buffs are what I'm trying to get into the build. Armor sets, skills, potions, buffs from other players, all these things come into the equation. Although, outside of organized trials groups, I wouldn't count so much on buffs from other players. I mentioned potions, and I run potions of weapon power with this build. You have to use potions to be effective in combat. Get used to the idea of running potions for any difficult content you're doing. To maximize the effectiveness of potions, you're going to have to level the alchemy skill line so you can get the medicinal use passive, and that extends the duration of your potions. Alright, let's leave the character sheet and look at the skills. Okay, before I get into the skills, I want to say that I'm using a static rotation here, and that's a rotation that doesn't change. I start on one bar and go through those skills, then I switch to the other bar and go through those. Then I'll return to where I started and do it all over again until whatever I'm fighting is dead. Static rotations are going to work best for most players in the game. Also, since this is a 2-bar build, it involves light attack weaving. Hey wait, don't get up, where are you going? Sit back down. First let me say that my light attack weaving is lousy. I routinely miss half of my light attacks. But you don't have to have great light attack weaving to run 2-bar builds. Most of the damage comes from skills. Think of light attack damage as a bonus. The better you are at it, the more extra damage you can get. So now I'm going to talk about the skills I'm using, and I'll go in the order that I use them. Every one of these skills should be preceded by a light attack, and theoretically there should be one skill and one light attack used per second. Theoretically, that's the key word here. Just do it as well as you can and you'll see that it'll come out alright. I start out on my back bar, which is a destruction staff. My first skill is Skeletal Archer, and that's from the Gravelord skill line. This gives me an undead sidekick that fires arrows at enemies for 20 seconds. Next up is the first of my Scribed skills, and if you watch the Nightblade video, you've seen this one. This is Fiery Explosion, and it's a morph of the new Destruction Staff Grimoire, Elemental Explosion. I'll put the scripts I'm using up on the screen. I don't know if morph is the right word, but that's what I'm going to use until I hear otherwise. My morph of Elemental Explosion does instant fire damage, affects enemies with the 3 elemental status effects, and also causes enemies to be affected by Minor Brittle for 20 seconds. And I chose those effects by selecting the 3 scripts shown on your screen. Minor Brittle is a debuff causing enemies to take 10% more critical damage. That 10% plus the other damage it's doing make the 2-second cast time worth it. Next I use Blockade of Fire, and this is from the Destruction Staff skill line. This is the only skill where I'm not using a light attack beforehand. Because Fiery Explosion has that 2-second cast time, I queue up Blockade while I'm channeling Fiery Explosion. That makes Blockade automatically fire when Fiery Explosion ends, saving time in the rotation by saving me the trouble of having to guess when that long 2-second channel is going to end. Blockade of Fire is a powerful area of effect damage skill, and it also works in conjunction with my staff to increase weapon damage. After Blockade, I use my single target Major Breach skill, Elemental Susceptibility. This is another Destruction Staff skill, and it also applies the 3 elemental status effects every 7 seconds. Because this is single target, save this for bosses or exceptionally tough adds. Next I have my Burst Heal, Resolving Vigor. I like this better than the Necro healing skills, but you'll have to do PvP to get this skill. Resolving Vigor isn't a part of my rotation, but it's there when I need it. Finally, there's my ultimate, the Glacial Colossus. This is from the Gravelord skill line and causes enemies to take 10% more damage for 17 seconds due to major vulnerability. That's it from my back bar. Let's look at the front bar. This is my dual wield bar, and the first skill on it is Bloody Knife, which is a new Scribed skill. Bloody Knife is a morph of the dual wield skill Traveling Knife. I'll put the scripts up on your screen. Bloody Knife does physical and bleed damage, grants me Minor Berserk for 10 seconds, and makes enemies susceptible to the dual wield passive Ruffian for 6 seconds. Ruffian causes dual wield attacks to do 15% more damage. Normally Ruffian only works on enemies that have been stunned or otherwise disabled, but Bloody Knife allows me to get this 15% bonus on enemies that aren't suffering those effects. That's a big deal, and I'm actually going to use this as a substitute where I would have used Blighted Blast Bones. I'm going to alternate this with other attacks while I'm on this bar. So after I use Bloody Knife, I lay down the Barb Trap at my enemy's feet. This is a Fighter's Guild skill which increases my critical damage by 10% and does bleed damage while it's active. My next skill is another Scribed skill. This is Sundering Burst, and it's a morph of the Soul Burst Grimoire. Sundering Burst does physical damage and gives me Minor Courage, increasing my weapon and spell damage by 215. I was tempted to take Minor Breach instead of Minor Courage, but this build has a lot of physical damage, so the Sundered status effect has an uptime of 50 to 60%. When you hear Sundered, think Minor Breach, because that's most of what Sunder does. Sunder does a small amount of damage, but it causes Minor Breach, reducing the enemy's armor by 3,000 points. So anyway, it was more effective here to take Minor Courage, and that's exactly the kind of thing you'll be doing with scribing in your builds. You'll be making a judgment call based on your experience about which scripts are going to be the most effective for your build. Okay, now I'm going to use Gravelord Sacrifice from my Necromancer skill line. This skill will increase my damage with class and damage over time abilities by 15%. It's probably closer to 10% because this skill doesn't do any damage by itself, making it a dead cast. But still, 10% is a lot, and at this point I feel like I'm double dipping. Because remember, I'm using Bloody Knife as a substitute for Blighted Blastbones, which is the other morph opposite Gravelord Sacrifice. So that was Bloody Knife, then 3 other skills. Now I realize that none of those 3 skills was a dual wield skill, but the Ruffian passive is going to apply to my next cast of Bloody Knife, which is a dual wield skill. Don't forget I'm also getting Minor Berserk from Bloody Knife. Now I use Bloody Knife again. This is where that 15% damage bonus from Ruffian is going to kick in, because now I use my spammable Rapid Strikes 3 times. And now I really feel like I am double dipping. Rapid Strikes is a dual wield spammable attack. This has a channel time, so I have to slow down a little while I'm using it. If this all sounds a little sweaty, that's because it is. Necromancer isn't the easiest class to play. Still, if I can pull it off with my extremely average gameplay, I think you can too. Alright, now I use Bloody Knife a 3rd time, then Rapid Strikes 3 times again, and finally I use Bloody Knife one last time before I swap back to my other bar. Do you see what I did there? I made sure I have the Minor Berserk buff for the time I'm on my back bar. Unfortunately, Ruffian won't apply because that only works when I'm dual wielding. Last on this bar I have Flawless Dawnbreaker slotted for passive damage. This is from the Fighters Guild skill line. If you're just starting out in the game, be sure to pick up this skill line right away. The Fighters Guild skill line is easy to level, and you're going to find yourself using skills from it on practically every build. Alright, that was it for skills. Let's find Nomeg Rhine and do a quick fight. I drink a potion, summon the archer, cast Fiery Explosion, Wall of Elements, Elemental Susceptibility, Glacial Colossus, and Bar Swap. Then it's Bloody Knife, Trap, Sundering Burst, Gravelord Sacrifice, Bloody Knife again, and Rapid Strikes 3 times. Bloody Knife, Rapids another 3 times, Knife a final time, swap back to the other bar, and it's rinse and repeat. Okay, let's make it look good for the cameras. Where do you want it? Ugh, that's gotta hurt, even for a Daedra. 51,000 points of damage per second, and unless you're trying to get to the top of the leaderboards, that will take you wherever you want to go. This is right up there with my best builds I posted, and I have to say I think scribing is a huge help for the Necromancer class. Without scribe skills, there's no way I would have gotten the same results. The only thing I'm not happy about is I think I'm using the Zaan monster helm as a bit of a crutch. I'll have to run something else the next time. Alright, let's look at the gear. I'm using Daggers of the Order's Wrath. Order's Wrath is a 5-piece crafted set from the High Isle, and it's currently the strongest crafted set in the game. My main hand is in the Nirnhone trait, and the offhand is charged. The main hand has a fire damage glyph, and the offhand is poison. On the back bar I've got a Maelstrom Perfected Inferno Staff and the Infused trait with a weapon damage glyph. When you cast Blockade of Fire, try to make sure it's going to stay on an enemy for its entire duration. When it does, you're going to get a healthy increase to your weapon damage because of the trait and the glyph on the staff. If you don't have the perfected version, run the normal one, or even an Order's Wrath staff, but try to get the trait and the enchantment right. My jewelry is Deadly Strike and the Bloodthirsty trait with weapon damage glyphs. Deadly Strike comes from Cyrodiil, but you can buy it from guild traders. If you do jewelry crafting, you can make Order's Wrath jewelry. Whatever you want to do here. I have 2 body pieces in the Deadly set and 3 more in the Order's Wrath set. All that stuff is medium with the Divine's trait. My head and shoulders are the Zaan monster set, but I already told you guys that. Run the best monster set you can get your hands on if you don't have that. Okay, let me show you the blue champion points and we can wrap this up. The blue champion slottables here are Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, Thaumaturge, and Wrathful Strikes. Well, that's it for today's build video, The Bloody Knife. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, help me out by hitting the like button. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. At the end there's a fashion show, and after that is a little fight that's a minor spoiler from the new Gold Road content. It's a pretty trivial Overland dungeon boss, but I'd rather not spoil anything at all for you. So if you don't want any content spoiled, no matter how trivial, stop the video sometime during the fashion show. Alright, that's it. Again, thanks for watching. Have a great day and enjoy your adventures in Tamriel.